Apologize to Joel, Helena, or I'll call the police myself. Helena Dawson stepped into a luxury boutique to investigate an irregularity that threatened the empire she had secretly built. There, she found her husband alongside Brooke Finley, the woman who had been occupying an increasingly large space in his life. A torn garment, an accusation of theft, and 7 minutes erased from the cameras transformed the visit into a spectacle of humiliation. But no one in that store imagined that the woman forced to kneel was the true owner of everything. Helena noticed something was wrong even before she passed through the glass doors of Lumina Atelier on Rodeo Drive. The main display window showcased the winter collection in wine and ivory tones, but the central dress was not part of the approved catalog. It was a long black gown, embroidered with a nearly invisible silver thread. It had been protected for years in the company's private archive. Helena knew every stitch of that embroidery because she had watched her own mother sew it during the last weeks she could still hold a needle. Officially, the model didn't exist, had no price, no sales code, and no authorization to leave the climate-controlled vault. Yet, there it was, illuminated like ordinary merchandise, Helena wearing dark jeans, a white shirt, and a beige logo-free coat. She entered without announcing her arrival to management. She wanted to observe before giving orders. Over the past 3 months, small discrepancies had appeared in inventory reports. Exclusive pieces would disappear for a few hours and reappear unrecorded, while prototype photographs reached social media before launches. Someone within Lumina Atelier was opening doors for an enemy. She just didn't expect to find her own husband standing before the forbidden dress, smiling at another woman. Ryan Sterling held a glass of champagne while Brooke Finley twirled before the mirror. Lumina Atelier's image director wore the black dress that should have been locked in the archive, and the fabric molded her body with a precision that made the saleswomen praise in chorus. Ryan watched Brooke as he hadn't looked at Helena in months, with undivided attention, without the impatient weariness he usually brought home. When he saw his wife reflected in the mirror, his smile vanished. Brooke, on the other hand, slowly smiled, almost satisfied, as if that coincidence was exactly what she had expected. "Helena, what a surprise," she said, placing a hand to her chest. "Ryan mentioned you didn't care for sophisticated stores." Helena didn't respond to the provocation. Her eyes were fixed on the hem of the dress, where the silver thread formed 3 small leaves. One of them looked crooked. Someone had opened the inner seam. "Take that dress off now," she ordered in a low voice. The saleswomen exchanged glances, offended by the tone of a client they judged to be ordinary. Ryan placed his glass on a tray and approached his wife, his jaw tight. "Have you lost your mind?" he asked. Helena continued to look at Brooke. "This piece is not for sale." Brooke tilted her head, feigning surprise. "And since when do you understand what is or isn't for sale here?" The store manager, Cynthia, appeared near the fitting rooms with a tablet against her chest. She recognized Helena immediately, though she had never been authorized to reveal her identity. For a second, her lips formed the word, "owner," but she swallowed the syllable before the sound escaped. "Miss Dawson, perhaps we can talk in private," she suggested, pale. Brooke noticed the nervousness and averted her eyes to Cynthia, carefully registering that reaction. Ryan, however, interpreted the deference as fear of a scene. "There's nothing to talk about," he stated. "My wife came in here attacking a client." Helena felt the word wife cut through her with cruel irony. Ryan hadn't introduced her that way at events for almost a year. He would say she preferred discretion, when in fact he was ashamed to bring her into the social circles where he was trying to rebuild the Sterling family's prestige. Brooke walked to a small platform in front of the mirror and spread her arms, displaying the dress. "I was thinking of wearing it to the Finley Foundation dinner." "Ryan can't think anything about a piece that doesn't belong to him," Helena replied. Ryan's face hardened. "Don't start. Not today." Brooke stepped down from the platform and passed Helena so closely that her sweet perfume made Helena nauseous. Then, without anyone but the two of them seeing, she caught her nail on the already open stitch and pulled. The sound of tearing silk was faint, but Brooke's scream made the entire store turn to them. She recoiled on purpose, holding the side of the dress, now open from hip to thigh. "You're crazy!" she exclaimed, her eyes immediately filled with tears. Helena saw Brooke's nail, still caught on a black thread, and understood the charade. Even before Ryan reached them, "She tore the dress!" Brooke cried, grabbing his arm. "She tried to rip it off me." Helena didn't move. She observed the opening in the fabric, looking for the internal strip where the memory thread should be a special fiber, used by the creative team to store the garment's encrypted history. The strip wasn't there. Only a precisely cut edge remained, hidden beneath the tear. "You removed something from the lining," Helena said. Brooke blinked, but regained her wounded expression. "She's making this up because I caught her rummaging in my bag," a saleswoman murmured. Another discreetly blocked the exit door. Brooke pointed to an open leather handbag on the sofa. "I went to the fitting room, and when I came back, her hand was inside. She must have come to steal." Helena finally looked up at Ryan, expecting him to recognize the absurdity. 11 years of marriage should be worth more than an improvised accusation. But what she found on his face wasn't doubt, it was shame. Ryan grabbed her arm and pulled her away from Brooke. "Say that's not true," he demanded, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. Helena felt several cell phones lift around them. Clients, who, minutes earlier, had been choosing bags and shoes, were now recording the scene with hungry curiosity. "You know it's not true," she replied. "I want to hear it from your mouth." Helena held his gaze. "I won't defend myself against a lie created by your mistress." Silence fell like a heavy object. Brooke put a hand to her mouth, feigning shock. Ryan released Helena only to take a step back, as if she had hit him. "Watch what you say." "That's what she is, isn't she?" Helena asked. "Or are you also going to demand that I pretend not to have seen the messages, the dinners, and the nights you came home smelling of her perfume?" A client muttered something about a scandal. Ryan noticed the cameras, and his face turned red. For him, public exposure was a greater threat than the revealed infidelity. "You came all this way to make a scene because you followed me," he concluded. "You entered a store where you can't buy anything, attacked Brooke, and now you're trying to humiliate me." Helena felt a deep pain, but showed no emotion. The sentence said more about him than any confession. Ryan believed she couldn't afford a dress from Lumina Atelier. He had no idea that every square foot of that store existed because she had created it. Cynthia approached again, this time with enough courage to intervene. "Mr. Sterling, we need to check the footage before accusing anyone. The system records all fitting rooms and corridors." Brooke quickly turned. "The fitting room is a private area. There's no camera inside." "But there is in the corridor," Helena replied. Her knowledge surprised one of the saleswomen. Cynthia lowered her eyes to the tablet, typed the password, and paled even more. "There was a server interruption," she said. "The recordings were unavailable for 7 minutes." "How convenient," Helena murmured. Brooke began to cry with calculated delicacy, without smudging her makeup. "So it's her word against mine. But my bag was open, and the dress is destroyed." "Ryan, you saw how aggressively she came in?" Ryan took a deep breath. He could have chosen caution. He could have asked everyone to put away their phones, taken his wife to a private room, and awaited an investigation. Instead, he looked at Brooke, wearing the torn dress, and saw the influential woman who could introduce him to the right investors. Then he looked at Helena and saw the discreet wife, without a famous surname, who never explained her travels, nor revealed how much she earned from her consulting work. His resentment solidified into certainty. "Apologize," he ordered. Helena took a moment to understand. "Apologize to Brooke and the store, now." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "You're condemning me without a single piece of evidence. I'm preventing this from getting worse. Brooke can call the police. The store can sue you for damages and attempted theft. And your solution is to force me to confess to something I didn't do." Ryan approached, lowering his voice, but cell phones captured every word. "My solution is to prevent you from completely destroying the little respect I still have for you." Helena felt the phrase hit a place she thought was protected. For years, she had silently financed Ryan's ideas through intermediary funds, opened doors without revealing her own involvement, and endured his periods of frustration when businesses failed. She never wanted him to feel less than her. Now she understood that her discretion hadn't healed his pride. It had only fed it. Brooke held Ryan's hand with feigned hesitation. "I don't want to see her arrested. Perhaps an apology is enough." Helena noticed a small rectangular bulge under the sleeve of the jacket Brooke had left on the sofa. The strip removed from the dress might be there. She took a step in that direction, but Ryan blocked her way. "Don't touch anything else. Get out of the way. Kneel and apologize, Helena, or I'll call the police myself." For a few seconds, no one breathed. Helena looked at the man with whom she had shared a home, a bed, and plans that now seemed to belong to another life. There was no anger on her face. This disturbed Ryan more than a scream. "You really want to do this?" she asked. He mistook the question for weakness. "I want you to take responsibility for your actions." Brooke tried to hide a smile, putting on her victim's mask again when she noticed a camera pointed in her direction. Helena could have ended everything at that instant. She just needed to tell the manager her full name, demand a call to the board, and order the branch to close. In a few minutes, Ryan would know that the woman he treated as an intruder owned the entire network. But the absence of the internal strip changed everything. If Brooke knew Helena was the owner, she would destroy evidence, alert accomplices, and disappear behind lawyers. Helena needed to find out the full extent of the theft. She also needed to know who among the employees would continue obeying unjust orders when they believed she had no power whatsoever. Slowly, she placed one hand on the velvet bench in front of the fitting rooms. Her pride commanded her to remain standing. Strategy demanded silence. She bent one knee, not before Brooke, but to pick up a piece of the torn lining from the floor. Ryan, however, interpreted the movement as submission. "Louder," he said. "Everyone needs to hear." Helena closed her fingers around the fragment of fabric. The white light of the store seemed to flicker. It wasn't just the humiliation. She hadn't eaten since dawn, and the pressure she felt upon identifying the dress had turned into a violent throbbing behind her eyes. Brooke approached triumphantly, still holding the open side of her skirt. "Just say you're sorry for trying to steal from me." Helena raised her face. "I'm sorry." Brooke smiled, and Ryan relaxed for an instant. "I'm sorry you believe that 7 erased minutes will be enough to hide what you did." Brooke's smile vanished. Helena opened her hand and showed the small, precisely cut edge of fabric. "This wasn't torn. It was opened with a blade before you put on the garment." Cynthia brought a hand to her chest. An older saleswoman, Dorothy, recognized the silver thread and whispered that the dress should never have left the archive. Brooke tried to respond, but Helena was already standing up. The sudden movement made the floor tilt. Voices became distant, mixed with the noise of cell phones and staged crying. She sought support on the fitting room wall, but her fingers slipped on the mirror. Ryan took a step, perhaps instinctively, but Brooke held him back. Helena fell sideways, clutching the fragment to her chest. When she opened her eyes for a few seconds, she saw blurred faces above her. Cynthia asked someone to call an ambulance. Dorothy pushed away the curious onlookers and repeated with unexpected authority that no one should touch the dress. Ryan remained motionless, torn between approaching his fallen wife and preserving the image he had just built before Brooke. Helena heard a client say the video was already being posted. Another commented that the thief had fainted to escape the police. The metallic taste in her mouth brought her back to consciousness. She turned her face and saw Brooke crouched near the sofa, discreetly placing her jacket over her arm. Under the sleeve, the rectangular bulge was no longer there. Helena tried to warn Cynthia, but her voice wouldn't come out. Her eyes returned to the dress. The opening revealed the light lining, on which were 2 parallel cut marks. The memory thread had been removed before the staging, but Brooke couldn't have done that alone in a crowded store. Someone had removed the garment from the archive, turned off the cameras, and prepared the dress for her before darkness reached Helena again. She noticed the most frightening detail. Attached to the torn fabric was a blue thread used only by the internal conservation team. The betrayal hadn't started with Ryan. It was hidden within Lumina Atelier itself. Helena awoke to the regular sound of a heart monitor and the uncomfortable sensation that she had left something important behind. The private clinic's white ceiling seemed distant, almost liquid. When she tried to move her right hand, she found her fingers closed around the piece of fabric she had picked up from the floor of Lumina Atelier. The small black strip was crumpled, but the blue thread attached to the edge remained intact. This wasn't just any sewing detail. The conservation department used that shade only to mark The doctor who entered the room explained that she had suffered a drop in blood pressure aggravated by stress and fasting, recommending rest and regular eating. No serious damage, no clinical reason to remain hospitalized. Helena thanked her, but barely heard the rest. On an armchair, her cell phone vibrated non-stop. There were dozens of calls from the board of directors, messages from the legal team, and a series of alerts about the store video, which was already circulating with cruel captions. The screaming wife, the alleged thief, the woman who fainted to escape the police. Among all the messages, there wasn't a single one from Ryan. The first call Helena answered came from Leah Morgan, Lumina Atelier's public CEO, and one of the few people who knew the company's entire control structure. "I can suspend the manager, close the branch, and release a statement in your name today," Leah said, barely concealing her indignation. "The board wants an immediate answer." Helena looked at the blue thread in her hand. "No one will be fired until we know who did what." "Helena, they forced you to kneel inside your own store. And exactly for that reason, I cannot act like a wounded owner. If I expose my identity now, Whoever disabled the cameras will disappear with the rest of the evidence. Leah was silent for a few seconds. She knew that tone. It was the same one Helena had used years earlier when she discovered an old supplier was falsifying invoices and decided to shadow him for weeks before contacting lawyers. The server registered a manual intervention, Leah informed her. It wasn't an automatic failure. Someone with supervisory access interrupted the recording at 3:01. 7 minutes later, the system restarted on its own. How many people had that level of access in that branch? 4. Cynthia, the head of security, Brooke, and a third-party technician. Helena closed her eyes. Brooke didn't need to cut the power. She just needed to know the right person. After being discharged, Helena refused the car sent by management and left through the clinic's back entrance. She hailed a regular taxi and watched New York City pass by the window, gray and hurried, while eating half a muffin bought at the reception. On her phone screen, the humiliation video accumulated views. The recording began when Ryan demanded the apology and ended the moment Helena fainted. It didn't show Brooke pulling the fabric, nor the initial confrontation about the dress. The comments judged her with the certainty of those who believed they had witnessed everything. Helena felt shame, but not in the way Ryan had imagined. She was ashamed to have shared her life with someone capable of turning a convenient lie into a sentence. She called him only once. Ryan declined the call and sent a message 2 minutes later. "We need to talk when you're calmer." She read it twice, saved a screenshot, and put her phone away. Not yet. First, she needed to return to the store as the accused woman, not the owner. She needed to observe who would show fear, who would try to help her, and who would have already prepared a version of events. Lumina Atelier remained open when Helena returned in the early evening. The display window had been changed, and the black dress was gone. 2 security guards stood near the entrance. One of them recognized her and hesitated, while the other extended his arm to block her passage. "Ma'am, you cannot enter," he stated. "There's a directive from management." Helena raised her phone, keeping her voice calm. "I was accused of theft at this establishment. I have the right to request a copy of the internal incident report and to know if you called the police." Cynthia appeared behind them, looking more distraught than a few hours earlier. "Let her in." She led Helena to a private consultation room, away from the main showroom. On the table was an already filled-out form, reporting that Helena had tried to remove an item from Brooke's bag and damaged a garment during an argument. The line for witnesses contained the name of Julia Nelson, a recently hired saleswoman who had barely dared to look at Helena during the commotion. "Julia saw this?" Helena asked. Cynthia rubbed her hands. "Is that what she declared, or is that what she was told to declare?" Cynthia's silence answered first. Brooke said that any employee who refused to cooperate could be held responsible for the damage to the dress, she finally admitted. "Julia supports her mother and 2 siblings. She was scared." Helena asked to speak with the young woman without supervisors present. Julia entered a few minutes later, clenching her fingers so tightly that her nails had left marks on her skin. She was 22 years old and wore her immaculate uniform, despite her swollen eyes. "I didn't see you reach into the bag, ma'am," she confessed before even sitting down. "I was near the cash register when I heard the scream. Miss Brooke called me afterward and said there was a recording showing everything. She said if I didn't confirm it, I would look complicit." Helena placed the form between them. "You signed because you believed there was a video?" "I signed because the security manager said I could lose my job." Julia swallowed hard. "But I saw something before. Miss Brooke went into the fitting room with a dress and a small pair of scissors. I thought it was to cut a tag." Helena felt her attention narrow. "You told this to anyone?" "To Miss Cynthia. Then Mr. Ryan called me aside and told me I shouldn't invent details to protect a thief." The word seemed to hurt Julia as she repeated it. Helena showed no impact. She merely asked her not to delete messages, not to sign new documents, and to send any communication she received to the store's legal team. Julia nodded, still unaware that she had received orders from the owner herself. In the security room, Helena found a restarted server, a nervous technician, and a report too simplified to be true. The head of security, Marcus, claimed the interruption was caused by an automatic update. Helena pointed to the manual execution time and asked why an update would have required Brooke's supervisor password. Marcus averted his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "His password was used 2 minutes after hers to confirm the shutdown," Helena replied. He stared at her, startled not just by the accusation, but by the level of information she possessed. How does a client know that? Perhaps because a client accused of theft has more interest in the truth than the person responsible for protecting the store. Cynthia asked Marcus to leave and close the door. Then, she confessed that Brooke had demanded temporary access to the system, claiming she was preparing a surprise promotional video. Marcus had authorized it without formally logging the request. She knew exactly which corridor would be without footage, Helena said. That means the scene was planned before I even arrived, Cynthia frowned. But how could she know you would come? Helena didn't answer. Only 3 people knew she would conduct an unannounced inspection that afternoon. One was Leah, another was the director of operations. The third was an assistant who had prepared the inventory report. Ryan appeared at the store shortly after 8 p.m. He entered through the side door with quick steps and found Helena at the security terminal. His first expression was one of relief, the second of irritation. You left the clinic without telling me. You didn't ask if I was okay. I knew it wasn't serious, Brooke told me. The answer came out naturally, and perhaps that's why it was even more painful. Helena slowly turned. Brooke knew before you spoke to me. Ryan realized his mistake but chose to attack. Let's not discuss this here. You've caused enough trouble. I caused trouble? You came into the store, confronted Brooke, and turned a private situation into a scandal. The video is hurting all of us. Helena let out a short breath. All of us means your career. He approached, lowering his voice. My firm is about to close the biggest contract in its history. Lumina Atelier hired our team for a strategic evaluation. Any negative exposure could ruin months of work. Helena already knew that Ryan's firm was participating in a financial analysis of the brand, but he had never revealed the client's name. Now he confirmed, without realizing it, that he had been inside her company long before that day. Who recommended your firm? She asked. Ryan hesitated for a fraction of a second. Brooke made the initial presentation. Of course, she did. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. Stop treating her like a criminal just because you're jealous. She disabled the cameras. You have no proof. I have the access log. Ryan looked at the monitor, and then at Cynthia, who remained motionless. That can be explained. Everything can be explained when the explanation protects what you want to believe. The phrase hit him. For an instant, Helena saw in his face the doubt she had expected to find at the store. But Ryan was too entrenched in the decision he had made in public. Admitting that Brooke had lied meant admitting that he had humiliated his own wife for no reason. His pride wouldn't allow that step. Even if she accessed the system, that doesn't prove she tore the dress, he argued. And it doesn't explain why you knew the piece wasn't for sale. Helena sensed the danger of the question. She replied without altering her tone. I worked for years in textile restoration. I recognize an archival piece when I see one. You never talked about this dress. There are many things about me you never wanted to know. Ryan lowered his eyes, but soon regained his rigid posture. Brooke is willing not to press charges, provided you sign a retraction. So, she's afraid of a formal investigation. She's trying to avert a disaster. She's trying to control the narrative. When Ryan left to take a call, Helena returned to the showroom and observed the fitting room area. The store was almost empty. Dorothy, the oldest saleswoman, carefully closed a garment rack. Noticing Helena, she approached and handed her a small paper envelope. Inside was another piece of the black lining. I found it under the bench, after they took you away, she said. I kept it because I recognized Miss Celeste's stitching. Helena felt her mother's name tighten her throat. Who removed the dress from the archive? Dorothy looked toward the cameras before answering. A man from the conservation department came for it last night. He said he had authorization from management. I didn't recognize the employee, but he was wearing the internal team's gray jacket. Helena showed her the blue thread. Dorothy confirmed with a nod. That thread is put on when a piece undergoes technical inspection. Only 2 people at headquarters work with it. Helena asked for their names and memorized them. Before she walked away, Dorothy held her arm. I almost told them who you were when your husband ordered you to kneel. It's a good thing I didn't. I don't know how you managed to stay silent. Helena stared at the mirror before which Brooke had feigned an attack. I don't know either. It was past 10 p.m. when Helena arrived at the apartment she shared with Ryan. He hadn't returned yet. On the living room table, there was open mail and a leather briefcase he usually took to the office. Helena hadn't intended to rummage through personal documents, but the discreet Lumina Atelier logo on the spine stopped her. She opened the briefcase and found a presentation on the potential devaluation of the company. The report described projected sales decline, reputational risk, and an urgent need for external capital. Some projections were old, others included numbers that would only be consolidated the following week. Brooke had not only introduced Ryan to the contract, she was providing internal data before official approval. Helena photographed the pages, closed the briefcase, and went to the small office at the end of the hallway. There, she accessed an encrypted terminal connected to the company's historical archives. She searched for the dress code, withdrawal records, and edit history. The screen showed an authorization issued in her own name. Someone had copied her digital signature. She proceeded to the conservation file, looking for the names of the 2 technicians mentioned by Dorothy. The system requested additional authentication. Helena inserted her personal key and found a folder opened that same afternoon, a few minutes after her collapse. Before she could download the records, the screen flickered and displayed a red warning. External access detected. Mirrored session. Someone was tracking her movements in real time. Helena ended the connection, but it was too late. On the other side of the city, Brooke sat in a car outside Ryan's building with a tablet resting on her lap. On the screen, the alert confirmed that the owner of the master key had just accessed the dress's archive. Brooke couldn't see the name associated with the credential, but she recognized the connection address, Ryan's apartment. She looked up at the lit window on the 12th floor and finally understood that Helena wasn't just a suspicious wife. The woman she had tried to destroy possessed access to the secret core of Lumina Atelier. The next morning, Helena woke before Ryan and found the apartment plunged into a hostile silence. The Lumina Atelier report remained closed on the table, exactly where she had left it. But her husband's cell phone vibrated beside the coffee maker with successive notifications. She didn't need to touch the device to see Brooke's name illuminating the screen. Ryan emerged from the hallway, already dressed for work, adjusting his shirt cuffs, and stopped when he noticed Helena by the window. For a few seconds, they seemed like strangers who had been forced to share the same address. "We need to decide what we're going to say," he stated. Helena didn't turn. "About your mistress? About the dress? Or about you forcing me to kneel before strangers?" Ryan pressed his lips together. "The fallout is out of control." The phrase confirmed what she already knew. His greatest fear wasn't having it destroyed from within, but being seen doing it. Helena picked up her bag and walked to the door. Ryan grabbed her wrist. "Brooke is going to issue a statement. You should also sign one." "A statement saying what?" "That there was a misunderstanding caused by a personal crisis. That you acknowledge having acted impulsively." Helena slowly freed her arm. "You want me to turn her lie into my confession? I want to prevent everyone from losing. You already chose who should lose." When she arrived at Lumina Atelier's administrative headquarters in Hudson Yards, Helena entered through the reserved parking lot and went up to the 18th floor, bypassing the reception. Leah waited for her in the conference room with the main directors and a screen displaying charts of falling sales. The store video had already surpassed millions of views, accompanied by a second recording published that morning, in which Helena appeared near Brooke's bag. The framing began too late to show that she had only walked past the sofa. There was no sound either. Even so, the caption claimed that the images confirmed the attempted theft. "This came from an internal camera," Helena said. "Someone accessed the server after I left the store." The director of operations, Calvin Vance, avoided her gaze. Leah zoomed in on the data on the screen. Digital sales had fallen 23% since the previous night. 3 influencers cancelled contracts, and a group of clients demanded that the brand take a stand against violence in stores. "The board wants you to appear publicly," Leah explained, "not as a victim, as the owner." Helena remained standing, observing the faces around the table. Some showed loyalty, others calculation. "If I reveal myself now, whoever is behind this will reorganize the entire operation. And if you remain hidden, there might not be a company to protect," Calvin retorted. "The brand is being associated with an unbalanced woman and a complicit team." Helena turned her eyes to him. "Interesting, you use the word complicit." Calvin paled slightly. "I'm talking about reputation." "So am I." Leah handed Helena a preliminary forensic report. The second recording had been exported by a credential linked to the image department and sent from a remote terminal. The access had passed through 2 intermediary servers but left a flaw. The first transfer occurred from the Sterling consulting firm's network. Helena read the line twice, feeling the confirmation turning into something colder than pain. Ryan might not have edited the video, but his company served as a bridge. "He knows," Helena asked Leah. "I don't know yet." Helena thought about the report found in the apartment, the future projections, the internal numbers, and the forged digital signature. "I want a complete copy of all documents sent to his consulting firm, without alerting the finance department." "There's one more thing," Leah said. "Lumina Atelier never formally contracted Sterling Consulting." Helena looked up. "So who signed the contract?" Leah slid another page across the table. The agreement had been signed by a company called Horizon Capital, presented as a potential strategic partner. Lumina Atelier had only authorized a preliminary analysis limited to public data. However, Ryan's report contained margins, inventory, forecasts, and confidential contracts. Someone within the company was feeding the consulting firm with information it should never have possessed. Helena closed the folder. Suspend all external accesses, but keep Brooke's credentials active. That's risky, Calvin warned. It's necessary. I want to know what else she intends to steal. In the early afternoon, the crisis took on another dimension. Brooke appeared in a live broadcast alongside a press advisor. Wearing discreet clothing and an expression of controlled suffering, she said she didn't want to attack Helena, that she understood the pain of an insecure wife, and that she had preferred silence out of respect for Ryan. Then, she displayed the torn dress and stated that the piece would be donated to an exhibition on violence against women after being restored. Helena watched the broadcast in her office until Brooke held the fabric up to the camera. The internal strip was still absent. The dress shown, however, was not the original. The position of the embroidery was inverted, and one of the silver leaves had been hastily redone. Brooke had replaced the piece with a replica to buy time. At the same instant, messages began to pour in. Clients demanded the firing of the unknown woman who had attacked the image director. Television programs requested interviews. A magazine published an article about Helena, calling her an unemployed former restorer and dependent wife of an aspiring businessman. The source of the personal information could only have been inside her home. Ryan knew that incomplete past. He only knew what she allowed him to know. Even so, someone had used his confidences to construct the perfect character. Poor, jealous, and desperate. Helena turned off the screen when Brooke, with tears in her eyes, announced that she would not press criminal charges out of compassion. It was a calculated gesture. Without a police investigation, the evidence would remain under private control. Ryan arrived at headquarters shortly before 5 p.m., unaware that her face. Helena monitored part of the conversation via an internal monitor authorized by Leah. Ryan seemed tense, but not indignant. Brooke sat beside him, her hand resting on the table, too close to his. The sales decline confirms that the brand is more vulnerable than we imagined, Ryan said, flipping through the charts. Horizon Capital could use this to propose an entry with a discount. Helena felt her blood run cold. Brooke replied that they needed to wait another 48 hours. Enough time to increase social media pressure? Calvin asked if the scandal couldn't harm the negotiation. On the contrary, Brooke stated, the more unstable the management appears, the easier it will be to convince the board that it needs external capital. Ryan closed his briefcase, uncomfortable. I don't want Helena to be dragged through this more than necessary. Brooke touched his arm. She already did that to herself. Didn't you see? He didn't answer, didn't defend her, but also didn't agree. For Helena, that belated hesitation was more bitter than his earlier certainty. Ryan was beginning to suspect, but he remained at the table because the contract promised to save his firm. Leaving headquarters, Helena found Ryan waiting near the elevator. He was surprised to see her emerge from the restricted area. What are you doing here? He asked. Working. You don't work for Lumina Atelier. Helena pressed the ground floor button. Are you sure? The doors opened, but Ryan held the panel before they closed. Stop these games. The video got worse. Brooke is trying to contain the situation, and you keep showing up where you shouldn't. Brooke published a stolen internal recording. You can't prove it was her. I can prove the file passed through your company's servers. His face went pale. That's impossible. Then investigate. Ryan entered the elevator with her. Helena, listen. My team received materials from various sources. I don't control every file. But you signed the reports. What reports? The ones where Lumina Atelier loses value even before official numbers are consolidated. He was silent long enough to confirm that he understood the gravity. You went through my things. I found company documents where I live. That doesn't give you the right to invade my work. Helena let out a short laugh. You accused me of theft in front of an entire store. Now you're worried about boundaries? The elevator stopped between two floors for a few seconds, and the closed space seemed to strip away the rest of their masks. Ryan ran a hand over his face. My consulting firm is in debt. If this contract fails, I lose everything. So, that's why, Helena asked. You humiliated me to protect a contract. I didn't know the video would be released. But you knew Brooke was feeding your firm information. Ryan averted his eyes. She said she had authorization, and you believed her because you needed to believe her. The door remained closed, and Helena felt a deep, almost calm sadness. You always do this. You choose the version that protects your pride. When your businesses went wrong, it was the partner's fault. When our marriage cooled, it was because I was distant. When Brooke lied, it was because I seemed jealous. Ryan breathed with difficulty. I made a mistake in that store. No, you made a choice. I was under pressure. I was on the floor. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he found no answer. When the elevator moved again, Ryan held the door before Helena exited. Sign the separation without turning this into a public war. I guarantee you'll be financially protected. Helena stared at him in silent astonishment. He still believed he was offering security. He still didn't realize that everything around him, from the contract to the elevator they were in, existed under the authority of the woman he was trying to reduce to alimony. That night, the board met in emergency. 2 investors requested the immediate entry of Horizon Capital. 3 directors advocated for Brooke's suspension until the audit's conclusion. Calvin insisted that Helena's exposure as owner could seem like a desperate attempt to manipulate public opinion. The secret controller of the network is precisely the woman accused of attacking an executive, he said. That could destroy governance. Helena observed his hands on the table. His index finger drummed whenever he lied, a habit she had noticed years earlier. How do you know I was formally accused? She asked. It's on all the news portals. The portals speak of suspicion. You used the term from the internal report. Calvin stopped drumming his finger. Leah asked the security team to block the exit, but Helena raised her hand. Not yet. I want everyone to remain exactly where they are. She connected a file to the main screen. A chain of financial transfers appeared between a third-party conservation company, Horizon Capital, and an account linked to Calvin's brother. The director tried to stand up. This is absurd. Perhaps, Helena replied, but it explains how the dress left the archive with my digital signature. Calvin denied any involvement and demanded a lawyer. Before the discussion advanced, Helena's phone vibrated. It was a message from Julia, the young saleswoman. There was no text, just a 4-3-second audio. Helena put on her headphones and immediately recognized Brooke's voice. In the recording, she ordered Julia to confirm the attempted theft and promised that after the acquisition of Lumina Atelier, there would be a promotion for those who showed loyalty. A male voice appeared in the background, saying the cameras would remain off for 7 minutes, not a second more. Helena listened to the segment 3 times. It wasn't Ryan, it was Calvin. The board was still debating when she stood up and left without explanation. She called Dorothy, who informed her that she had seen a conservation van entering the headquarters garage. Minutes later, the system sent an alert. Someone had accessed the physical archive of historical pieces using Brooke's credentials. Helena went down the service elevator and walked through the underground corridor to the climate-controlled vault. She didn't call security. If Brooke was trying to destroy the true dress, any alarm could make her flee with the evidence. Helena opened the door using the master key and found the lights off. The smell of old fabric and cedarwood filled the room. Among the movable cabinets, she heard the metallic sound of a drawer being forced open. She walked unhurriedly, guided by the dim emergency light, to the last row. Brooke was turned away, wearing gloves and holding a solvent container over the black dress. The true garment lay open on a conservation table beside her. The silver strip removed from the lining was connected to a small digital reader. Helena closed the door behind her. The click echoed in the archive. Brooke turned, startled, and for an instant lost all the calculated elegance she displayed before the cameras. You shouldn't be here, she said. Helena advanced a step. That phrase has been repeated frequently within my own company. Brooke looked at the master key in her hand, then at the dress. Comprehension slowly dawned on her face, followed by a fear she couldn't hide. Who are you? She asked. Helena stopped on the other side of the table, between Brooke and the only exit. The woman you tried to turn into a thief. The woman whose husband you used to access confidential reports. And the only person who can open this archive without leaving an authorization request. Brooke squeezed the solvent container. Don't come closer. You can destroy the dress, Helena replied, but you can't erase what has already been copied. It was a bluff. The strip had not yet been fully recovered, and Helena didn't know what data remained intact. Even so, Brooke hesitated. It was enough. Helena reached for the emergency panel and turned on all the lights. Hidden cameras, independent of the main system, activated on the ceiling. Brooke looked up and realized that every movement was being recorded. Helena then pronounced, for the first time before her, the full name listed in the company's control documents. Helena Celeste Dawson, founder and majority shareholder of Lumina Atelier. Now place the solvent on the table and tell me who else is involved. Brooke didn't place the container on the table, For a few seconds, she remained motionless, staring at Helena, as if the revealed name had altered the temperature of the archive. The woman she had treated as an oblivious, dependent, and easily disposable wife was the founder of Lumina Atelier. Worse still, she was between Brooke and the exit, with the hidden cameras recording the solvent, the true dress, and the silver strip connected to the reader. "You're lying," Brooke said, but her voice no longer held its firmness. Helena raised the master key. "This key responds only to my biometrics. The cameras you disabled belong to commercial security. These are part of the asset management system and were never under your administration." Brooke looked at the ceiling. The small red light on each lens destroyed the last vestige of control on her face. Still, she didn't surrender. "You let me humiliate you to set a trap? I let you believe you had won because I needed to discover the extent of your fraud. And your husband was part of the investigation too." The question hit Helena, but she didn't avert her gaze. "Ryan's involvement was his choice. What he did to me was his choice." Brooke let out a bitter laugh, finally placed the solvent on the table, and pulled off her gloves. "So you know he signed everything. I know he signed reports he didn't fully understand. I also know he accepted confidential information because he needed money and prestige. That doesn't make him innocent. It just makes him useful to people like you." Helena activated the remote door lock and called Leah on the internal communicator. In less than 2 minutes, 2 asset protection agents arrived, accompanied by the company lawyer. Brooke didn't try to flee. She sat down at the conservation table, crossed her arms, and regained some of the elegance she wore as armor. Helena ordered that the dress, the reader, and the container be preserved for internal forensics. When one of the agents approached the silver strip, Brooke warned that an incorrect removal would erase the data. The phrase confirmed more than she intended. "So you know exactly what's in there," Helena observed. Brooke stared at her. "I know your mother was brilliant and naive. She created a system to protect the designs but trusted people who didn't deserve it." Helena felt the mention of Celeste cut like a knife. "You knew my mother? My mother sewed for her. She sewed for all of you. She was paid per piece while the owners turned her work into fortune. Celeste was never a factory owner. When your mother worked with her, she was a pattern maker and was also paid per piece. Is that what they told you?" Brooke leaned forward. "My mother created the finish that made Lumina's first collection recognizable. When she tried to claim credit, she was sidelined." Helena knew that story didn't match the archive she had preserved, but she also recognized something true in Brooke's pain. Before she could respond, Leah entered the room with a stern face. "The meeting is ready. Board, audit, employee representatives and lawyers at headquarters?" "At the Rodeo Drive store," Helena replied. "As you ordered." Helena looked at Brooke. "That's where the lie began. That's where it will end." The boutique was closed to the public shortly before noon. In the center of the showroom, chairs were arranged in front of the platform where Brooke had worn the forbidden model. The unit's employees occupied the sides while board members, Horizon Capital representatives, and lawyers settled into the front rows. Cameras from broadcasters and news portals waited outside, but Helena authorized the entry of only 2 chosen teams to record the entire meeting, uncut. Ryan arrived accompanied by a consulting firm partner. He wore the same impeccable suit as the day he had forced Helena to kneel, yet seemed smaller inside it. Seeing her near the display window, he tried to approach, but a security guard informed him that he should take the place designated for external consultants. "Helena, we need to talk before this," he insisted. She didn't raise her voice. "You had 11 years to talk to me. Now you'll listen." Brooke entered a few minutes later, accompanied by her lawyer. She wasn't handcuffed, nor was she treated as a convicted criminal. Helena had refused any display of force. Even so, the silence that fell when she walked through the store weighed more than a public exposure. Brooke, for the first time, realized that perhaps she had never been a lover, partner, or chosen one. She had merely been a door. Leah began the meeting by presenting Lumina Atelier's corporate documents. On the main screen appeared the full name of Helena Celeste Dawson, followed by the majority stake she maintained through a control structure created years earlier. A murmur went through the store. Cynthia brought a hand to her mouth. Julia's eyes widened in surprise. Ryan remained motionless, staring at the numbers as if they were written in another language. Helena stepped onto the platform without jewels, without a formal gown, and without any ostentatious symbol of wealth. She wore the same beige jacket from the day of the humiliation. "My name is Helena Dawson," she began. "I founded Lumina Atelier with my mother in a rented loft in the Arts District, when we had 3 sewing machines and no guarantee we'd make rent the next month. For years, I kept my identity separate from the company's public image, to protect creativity, employees, and the brand's independence. This silence, which should have been a defense, became a vulnerability. People inside and outside Lumina began to believe no one was watching. Brooke stared without blinking. Helena continued. 4 days ago, I was accused of theft inside a store that belongs to me. My husband preferred the word of another woman to mine and demanded that I kneel. I am not here to force anyone to kneel in return. I am here to present facts. The first sequence displayed showed the history of the black dress. Helena explained that the model was designed by Celeste and never received commercial authorization. The silver strip sewn into the lining was not a mere adornment. It stored the encrypted record of changes made to the garment, including dates, responsible parties, and digital versions linked to the creation system. Forensics had recovered part of the content overnight. On the screen appeared accesses made with Brooke's credentials, followed by the copying of patterns that had not yet been released. Photographs of a collection belonging to a brand financed by Horizon Capital were placed side by side with Lumina's designs. The differences were minimal. This isn't just about a torn dress, Helena explained. It's about an attempt to erase the history that proves the misappropriation of an entire collection. One of Horizon's representatives stood up and denied any involvement, claiming the company had acquired the designs from an independent studio. Leah presented transfers between this studio, a conservation service provider, and an account controlled by Calvin's brother. Then, she showed the forged authorization with Helena's digital signature. Calvin, seated in the back, was escorted to a private room by the company lawyers. No criminal conclusion was announced. The audit would document everything and forward the material to the competent authorities. Helena didn't need to invent a punishment. It was enough to prevent those involved from burying their tracks. Brooke stood up when her name appeared next to the copies. They're turning a labor dispute into a conspiracy, she declared. Lumina exploited seamstresses for years and now uses technology to present itself as a victim. Helena asked them to display the next file. Payment records made by the company to Amelia Finley, Brooke's mother, appeared, accompanied by co-authorship contracts for 3 finishes and participation in the sales of the first collection. There was also a letter written by Celeste, in which she acknowledged Amelia's work and offered her a permanent position in the atelier. The response refused the position because Amelia had decided to return to her hometown in rural Georgia after falling ill. Brooke observed the documents, pale. This was fabricated. The signature was notarized at the time, and payments continued until her death, Helena replied. I can understand that your mother might have felt overlooked. I can admit that a company doesn't always perceive the pain caused by its structures. But you knew about these contracts. You accessed the archives 8 months ago. Brooke tightened her jaw. The motivation she presented to the world as justice began to reveal its more uncomfortable side. She had found evidence that the story passed down by her mother was more complex, but chose to ignore it because resentment fueled her actions. Money doesn't buy recognition, she said. Nor does suffering authorize fraud, Helena replied. You could have demanded credit, opened a dispute, contacted the press. You chose to sell other people's designs, manipulate employees, and destroy people to reduce the company's value. The screen changed again, this time to the reports produced by Sterling Consulting. Ryan straightened in his chair. The pages showed forecasts of decline, crisis scenarios, and a recommendation for the urgent entry of external capital. Helena highlighted the passages based on data that the consulting firm was not authorized to receive. Mr. Sterling, do you recognize your signature? Lumina Atelier's lawyer asked. Ryan slowly stood up. I recognize it. Did you know the data was confidential? Brooke told me that Horizon had obtained authorization for a full evaluation. Did you verify that authorization? He looked at Helena before answering. Did you receive any benefit conditioned on the completion of the deal? My firm would receive a commission if the acquisition was approved. The murmur increased. Ryan took a deep breath. I didn't know the numbers were being manipulated. I didn't know the scandal would be used to drive down the brand's value. Helena held his gaze. But you knew there was a conflict when your wife was accused by the woman supplying the data. Even so, you chose to pressure your wife to protect the contract. Ryan lowered his head. Yes, the admission didn't absolve him. It only stripped him of his last hiding place. Brooke tried to regain control. All of this still doesn't prove that I tore the dress or invented the theft. Helena signaled to Leah. Julia was called forward. The young woman trembled, but didn't avert her eyes. She recounted seeing Brooke enter the fitting room with scissors, being pressured to sign a false statement, and being promised a promotion after the company's acquisition. Then, the 4-3 Second audio was played through the loudspeakers. Brooke's voice ordered Julia to confirm the attempted theft. In the background, Calvin guaranteed that the cameras would remain off for 7 minutes. When the recording ended, Helena presented the full video from the archive's asset management cameras. Brooke appeared with the solvent before the dress and admitted knowing the content of the strip. Finally, another image, recovered from a reflection in the store's mirror, showed her hand catching her nail on the already cut seam before pulling it. It wasn't a perfect view, but combined with the records and testimony, it dismantled the staging. Cynthia cried silently. Dorothy held Julia's hand. Brooke looked around and understood there was no one left willing to support her version. Ryan walked across the central aisle when the meeting was suspended for lawyers to collect signatures. He stopped before Helena, at the same spot where he had forced her to kneel. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, his voice broken. Helena took a moment to reply. "Because I wanted to know if you could love a woman without turning her worth into social status. Was that a test? In the beginning, maybe. Then it turned into fear. I hid it because each year made the truth harder. I made that mistake, but my silence didn't put your hand on my arm. It didn't make you believe, Brooke. It didn't tell you to humiliate me." Ryan looked at the people around them, now aware of who she was. "I was desperate to save my firm. And to save it, you decided to sacrifice the person you believed had no power. That's the part you still need to understand." He tried to touch her hand, but Helena recoiled. "I can fix this. You can fix your reports, cooperate with the audit, and publicly take responsibility for what you've done. Our marriage is another matter. It won't be resolved because you discovered your wife is wealthy." Before leaving, Helena returned to the platform, announced that Brooke was suspended, that contracts with Horizon Capital would be terminated, and that no employee would be penalized for refusing to sign false statements. Julia would remain employed and receive legal support. Cynthia would remain in her position during the investigation, as she had tried to uphold correct procedure, although she had been slow to confront the pressure. Marcus would be dismissed for violating security protocol. "A company doesn't become just merely because its owner was wronged," Helena declared. "Justice also means distinguishing fear, omission, and fraud. I will not treat everyone as if they had committed the same act." Outside, the doors were opened to the press. Helena authorized the full video of the meeting to be published, without dramatic editing or images of her collapse. When reporters began to ask questions, she announced no vengeance, nor did she display triumph. She merely stated that Lumina Atelier would present the evidence to the competent authorities and revise its mechanisms for protecting creators. Behind her, Brooke left the store through the side exit, surrounded by lawyers. Ryan remained alone before the fitting room mirror, observing the spot where his wife had fallen. That night, the true dress returned to the conservation table. Dorothy and 2 specialists began to reattach the torn edges, preserving the small fragment Helena had kept since the clinic. The silver strip had been almost completely recovered, and its data confirmed the origin of the misappropriated designs. Helena observed the first stitch of the restoration before turning off the archive lights. She found on her desk a letter from Ryan, a copy of the public retraction he intended to release, and the unsigned separation documents. She didn't open the letter, not yet. Through the window, New York City shimmered, indifferent to the private ruins of those who believed they controlled everything. Helena had recovered the company, the dress, and her own voice, but she knew that true victory would not be in destroying Brooke or making Ryan beg. It would be in deciding what to build after all the masks had fallen. 3 weeks after the meeting at the Rodeo Drive store, Lumina Atelier no longer appeared in the news because of the video of a woman collapsing in front of the fitting rooms. The attention had shifted to the internal investigation, the misappropriated designs, and the review of contracts with Horizon Capital. Helena had refused to turn the crisis into an advertising campaign. She didn't authorize interviews about her marital life. She didn't display the wealth she had hidden, and she didn't allow the communications team to use the phrase about kneeling in advertisements. For her, turning her own humiliation into a slogan would just be another form of exploitation. Even so, her public identity altered the company's atmosphere. Employees who once spoke to an abstract board now knew who made the final decisions. Some began to treat her with a reverence that made her uncomfortable. Others showed resentment, as if her discretion had been a trap. Helena understood both reactions. For years, she had believed that leading in silence would protect her from others' greed. Now she saw that anonymity had also alienated people who might have asked for help earlier. At the first General Assembly after the crisis, she walked onto the stage without music or a grandiose introduction. "I don't want you to trust me because you've discovered how much I own," she told the employees. "I want to build a company where no one needs to own anything to be heard." Brooke was formally dismissed from Lumina Atelier. After the audit confirmed the misuse of data, the pressure on employees, and involvement in the transfer of designs, her bonuses were suspended according to contractual clauses, and the documents were forwarded to the relevant authorities for assessment. Helena prohibited any communication from calling her a criminal before an official decision. When Leah asked if that was compassion, Helena replied that it was consistency. Brooke had condemned her before an audience without proof. She wouldn't repeat the same gesture using a larger audience. The last encounter between the two occurred in a neutral room, during the handover of corporate equipment and documents. Brooke seemed tired, without makeup, and without the confidence she usually wore with the brand's clothes. "You won," she said, pushing her ID badge across the table. Helena didn't touch it. "This wasn't a competition for you." "Perhaps not. People like you can afford to call everything a principle." Brooke opened her bag and pulled out an old photograph of Amelia Finley next to Celeste Dawson, both smiling in front of a sewing machine. "My mother died believing she had been forgotten," Helena observed the image. "Perhaps she received money and still felt overlooked. One doesn't cancel out the other." Brooke looked up, surprised not to hear a denial. "So you admit your family failed?" "I admit that contracts don't heal all wounds, but your mother's pain didn't give you the right to threaten Julia, falsify evidence, and destroy my marriage." Brooke let out a dry laugh. "Your marriage was already destroyed. I just shone a light on it." Helena took the photograph with her, not as a memory of Brooke, but as proof of an emotional debt that financial records hadn't registered. Days later, she announced the creation of the Celeste and Amelia program, aimed at guaranteeing visible credit, contractual participation, and legal support for seamstresses, pattern makers, and independent creators collaborating with Lumina Atelier. The name caused resistance among some directors. Calvin no longer participated in meetings. He had been dismissed and was responding to internal and external procedures related to the transfers. Other executives feared the company would publicly admit historical errors. Helena refused the defensive language. "Acknowledging that invisible people built a brand doesn't weaken the company," she stated. "What weakens a company is depending on their silence." Dorothy was invited to join the program's advisory board. Julia began working with the integrity team, helping to revise reporting mechanisms for young or outsourced employees. Cynthia remained in management, but had to complete leadership training and admit to the entire team that her delay in confronting Brooke had allowed fear to spread. Marcus lost his security position, not because he was at the center of the fraud, but because he had agreed to break protocol in exchange for the promise of a promotion. Helena learned to separate degrees of responsibility, without pretending that small omissions didn't produce large consequences. Ryan released a public retraction 2 days after the meeting. In the video, he didn't mention Helena's wealth, nor did he ask for understanding for being under pressure. He admitted that he had received information without verifying its origin, that he had allowed ambition to override his judgment, and that he had humiliated his wife to protect a contract. Sterling Consulting abandoned the evaluation of Lumina Atelier, returned the fees received, and handed over the records to the audit. Ryan's firm lost clients. One of his partners left. For some time, he tried to save the firm, as he always had, seeking culprits, revising projections, and promising the crisis would pass. This time, however, there was no Helena behind the scenes, opening doors through funds or introducing contacts without revealing her own influence. Ryan discovered how much of his apparent capability had been sustained by the silent trust of the woman he had scorned. He didn't lose everything, but he had to sell the apartment where they lived and move the consulting firm to a smaller space. Helena didn't use the separation to take what was his, nor did she agree to pay the debts he had chosen to incur. When her lawyer asked if she wished to include the store incident as an additional argument, she replied that the breach of trust was enough. She didn't need to turn the end of the marriage into a moral tribunal. They met to sign the documents on a rainy afternoon in a discreet office near Park Avenue. Ryan arrived first and stood when Helena entered. He didn't try to hug her. On the table were 2 pens, a carafe of water, and 11 years reduced to pages marked with sticky notes. After the signatures, the lawyers withdrew for a few minutes. Ryan kept his eyes on the document. "I read your letter," Helena said. He looked up. "You read it?" "Yesterday." Ryan took a deep breath. In the letter, he hadn't asked her to come back. He described the times he had felt inferior, the shame of his father's bankruptcy, the fear of being seen as an insignificant man, and the ease with which he had turned Helena into a witness to his failures. He admitted that her success, even unknown, had always been present in the confidence with which she navigated crises. He had confused that confidence with coldness, because it was easier to blame her than to confront his own fragility. "I loved you," he said. "Maybe I still do." Helena didn't respond immediately. "You loved the version of me that didn't threaten the image you had of yourself. Does that mean nothing was real?" There wasn't a single truth. There was affection, good years, and choices we made together. But there was also fear, silence, and disdain. One doesn't cancel out the other. Ryan clasped his hands. "Can I change? I hope you do. But not with me." Helena held his gaze. "Not with me." The answer wasn't spoken with cruelty. That's precisely what made it impossible to dispute. Ryan looked out the window and saw the rain slide down the glass. "When I told you to kneel, I thought I was imposing order," he confessed. "Now I understand. I just wanted to prove to everyone that I had power over someone." Helena felt the memory of the cold floor of the store, the raised cell phones, and her hand clenched around the fragment of fabric. "You chose someone you believed to be weaker. That was the end for me." Ryan nodded, his eyes moist. "Knowing you owned everything didn't make what I did worse. It only made my blindness more evident." "Exactly." Helena stood up. Before leaving, she placed her old wedding ring on the table. Ryan didn't try to stop her. "Thank you for not destroying me," he said. Helena picked up her bag. "I didn't spare you. I just refused to keep defining my life by your choices." The door closed behind her without screams, without pleas, and without a promise of reunion. For the first time since the store, Helena felt she wasn't abandoning a marriage. She was leaving behind the need to wait for Ryan to recognize her worth. The black dress took almost 2 months to restore. Dorothy insisted on preserving an irregular stitch on the side, exactly where the fabric had been opened. The specialists could hide it, but Helena asked that it remain visible. The silver strip returned to the lining after the data had been copied and protected by a new system. The dress didn't return to the archive. It was placed in a permanent exhibition in the first renovated Lumina Atelier branch, alongside photographs of Celeste, Amelia, and the brand's first seamstresses. The plaque didn't mention Brooke, nor the scandal. It simply stated that the piece had survived an attempt at erasure and had been reconstructed without completely hiding the rupture. On opening night, Helena walked among clients, employees, and young creators selected by the new program. Julia presented a collection of accessories developed with artisans from underserved communities in Los Angeles. Cynthia led the team without arrogance. Dorothy remained near the dress, correcting anyone who called the seamstresses assistants. Leah approached Helena with 2 glasses of champagne. "The press wants a photo of you next to the piece." "Later," Helena replied. "First, I want to hear the names of those who worked on it." Brooke did not attend. Months prior, she had sent, through her lawyer, a statement acknowledging that the theft accusation was false. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She explained that she accepted responsibility for her actions, though she continued to believe that the fashion industry turned invisible women into disposable labor. Helena didn't respond directly. She incorporated the document into the internal process and continued the recognition program. She didn't want Brooke to become a convenient caricature. It would be easy to reduce her to a jealous mistress, just as it had been easy to reduce Helena to a jealous wife. The truth was more uncomfortable. Brooke possessed intelligence, talent, and a real wound. Even so, she chose to use other women as stepping stones. Her downfall didn't come from loving Ryan, nor from desiring a better life. It came from believing that suffering granted her license to reproduce the very violence she claimed to fight. Helena understood that forgiving didn't mean reopening doors. She could acknowledge the origin of Brooke's pain without allowing that pain to be used again against Julia, Dorothy, Amelia, Celeste, or anyone within Lumina. When the guests left, Helena remained alone in the gallery. The lights were dim, and the black dress seemed to float behind the glass. She approached the small irregular stitch on the side. For weeks, everyone asked her why she had hidden her identity, as if the revelation that she was wealthy automatically transformed the victim into a victor. Few understood that the secret had also been a prison. Helena had hidden her power to protect love, but a love that depended on ignorance could never be secure. She had hidden her authority to observe the company, but distant leadership had allowed people like Julia to believe they had no one to turn to. She didn't blame herself for Ryan's or Brooke's choices. However, she accepted her part in the architecture of silence, in which those choices grew. She touched the glass before the dress, and remembered her mother saying that a strong seam wasn't one that never broke, but one that distributed tension without destroying the entire fabric. Helena didn't want to go back to who she was before. She wanted to become someone who didn't need to disappear to feel protected. The next morning, she personally opened the store doors. There was no ceremony. A woman entered looking for a dress for a job interview. A couple quietly discussed the price of a gift. An employee adjusted the display window while the scent of coffee wafted from the small area reserved for the team. Helena helped the client choose a blue piece and listened to her questions without revealing she owned the brand. This time, however, she didn't hide it out of fear. She simply didn't need to turn every encounter into a display of power. She walked past the fitting room where she had fallen. The velvet bench remained in the same place, but the plaque with the store's rules had been replaced. The first sentence stated that no client or employee would be publicly accused without investigation and the right to respond. Helena read the words, took a deep breath, and walked forward. Behind her, the restored dress reflected the morning light. The small scar remained visible, not as a sign of defeat, but as proof that some ruptures didn't need to be erased for life to continue whole. No one in that store would ever kneel again to satisfy someone's pride.